Bava Batra Daf Yomi Aleph. Observe, don't judge. Na'sa דיין. Often you hear people say, don't be judgmental, don't judge people. What does judgment even mean? When are you judging people? When are you just observing? When are you noticing? What is the difference between observing and judging? And in halakha, these are very different functions, because we have the function of an aid, a witness, and we have the function of a דיין, who's a judge. And they're two very separate, different and separate functions, as we will see. In our Gemara, continuing really from the Gemara that we had yesterday, was that if these people go in to visit the dying man at night, then afilu shlosha, even if there are three of them, kotvin ve'enos din, they can be witnesses, they can record the event. The dying man, you remember, is dishing out his estate, and they're there. They can't sign a document as a beis din and say, we affirm that this is what the dying man wanted, this was his will. They can give evidence in front of another beis din. If there's a question, they can then go to a beis din, or the heirs can go to a beis din and put their claims. These three people who were there that night can give evidence, but they can't be dayanim, because it's at night time. You can't start a court case at night. Dayanim don't function at night when a court case is starting. Night time, tahavilu eidi, because if it's night time, they're witnesses. Once they're witnesses, ein eid na'sa dayan, then we have a principle that a witness can't become a dayan. There are all sorts of things that can happen. A Gentile can become a Jew. A Yisrael can't become a Kohen. There's some things you can change, some things you can't change. Despite what the entire world, proof that the majority is not always right. Men can't become women, and women can't become men. But there are some things you can transform, and an aid can't become a דיין. Explains the Rashbam, Hame'id ala davar ein na'sa od דיין. Once you've given evidence on something, you can no longer be a דיין, באותו דבר, on that matter. Even if you haven't yet given evidence, there's a whole machlokes Rashbam and Tosfos here and other Rishonim. But the Rashbam says, even if you've just seen the event, you haven't yet gone to beis din, but you observed in the capacity of an observer. You can't come in through that based on what you saw. Now become a judge. You would have to get other witnesses. You can't say, I don't need witnesses. I was there. I saw it myself. No, you will still need witnesses to come. You can't judge without the witnesses. It's my opinion that Rashbam offers a suggestion which isn't in the Gemara. This is based on the posuk of Amdu Shnei Ha'anashim, which the Gemara says is talking about witnesses. Two men will stand, that's witnesses. Lifnei Hashem, hainu lifnei dayanim, in front of Hashem. These are the dayanim. Ashwin and cried the tzarich la'id shnayim bifnei dayanim. So you see from there, two have to give evidence in front of witnesses, judges. But the witnesses themselves can't just suddenly become the judges. And there's a Pnei Yehoshua in Bava Kama that explains how the Rashbam gets it out of the posuk. But let's have a look at the verse. In Dvarim chapter 19, simple meaning is, and the two men who have the argument means the litigants. Lifnei Hashem, they stand before Hashem. Lifnei HaKahanim v'Hashoftim, the judges, Asher Yibiyam. The Gemara says in Shvuot, v'amdu Shnei Anashim ve'edim ha'katuv medaber. The Gemara establishes that when it says Shnei Anashim, it means that two people, not two people, not the litigants. It's that two people. Who are the two people? The two people are the edim. The edim have to stand before the judges. Why does it call the judges Lifnei Hashem? That's important for us to understand. Why does it call say Lifnei Hashem? Why not say B'amdu Shnei Anashim Asher Lehem Ariv Lifnei Hashoftim Sheyu B'yam Yimayim? Why Lifnei Hashem? So the Yerushalmi brings in Sanhedrin that Rabbi Kiva Kad Hava Ba'anash Azal Ba'i Meidin Kumeh, when a person would come before Rabbi Akiva for a din Torah to decide a matter of law, he would say to them, before we go ahead with this case, understand before whom you're standing. If you're witnesses, understand before whom you're giving evidence. If you're litigants, understand before whom you're claiming. You're giving evidence or you're claiming in front of the Ribono Shel Olam himself. Because it says, V'amdu Shnei Anashim Asher Lehem Ariv Lifnei Hashem, V'lo Lifnei Akiva ben Yosef. You're not standing in front of Rabbi Akiva. You're standing in front of Hashem. So the role of judge has a divine component to it. There's something in judgment that is superhuman. In evidence, it's not superhuman. You observe what you saw. But a judge has to consider such fine nuances A judge has to look at circumstance, and he's got to look at situation, he's got to look at intention, he's got to look at so many different things. And for that he needs siyata dishmaya, for that he needs Hashem's divine inspiration to give him the intuition, not just the wisdom and the knowledge. A דיין can't just have wisdom and knowledge. A דיין also has to have intuition. And Tosfos talks about the fact that although he says it only applies in capital cases, but the principle is there from Gemara Rosh Hashanah, that once you have seen something, you can't be chazule b'zchute, you can't see nuance. Once you've seen it, it's burnt into your mind. You've seen something. You saw A kill B. Now you've got to sit as a judge and say, but maybe he didn't. What do you mean maybe he didn't? I saw it. You don't have the opportunity to even debate nuance, to consider nuance, once you've seen something as a witness. So what we're looking at over here is, interestingly, not just two activities, giving evidence and acting as a judge. It's two persona. There's an interesting Rabbi Lapin on this, in order to answer a question that says a question in Seven Zion, where he talks about it's not that one who is giving evidence can't then sit in judgment. It's a persona. An aid is a persona. When you're observing something, you have the persona of a witness. When you're judging, you have the persona of a judge. And you can't switch on the same matter from one to the other. And what's important for us to realize is that those are capacities we use in life all the time. We're either observing or we're judging. Things are happening around us all the time. People are doing things. People are saying things. We're reading things. We're being exposed to enormous amounts of information. And we're immediately jumping to conclusions. We don't have control over that. We don't have control over what we see and hear and think about that much. We don't have that much control over it. And we don't even have control about the fact that we draw conclusions. What we do have control of, do we want to draw conclusions as an aid, as an observer? I've noticed that. That's all. Or as a judgment. What a wicked person. What a bad person. And our role in interpersonal relationships is to be the witness, not the judge. Because to be the judge, you've got to have a lifnei Hashem. You don't know what's going on inside a person. To say to somebody, you're a bad person, or which is what judgment implies. Judgment doesn't imply, as Uriah said to Rabbi Meir, it's not about judging the chotim. Don't judge the sinner. Judge the sin. That you can say. Murder is not a good thing. But to say you are a murderer, who knows what's going on and why? Today the world is very quick to put labels on people, on their character, to assassinate their character, to make divine judgments, things you couldn't know unless you were God. All the time, instead of just being able to observe, if you observe the facts, that's the role of an aid. And it's also very good for one's blood pressure. And aid's blood pressure doesn't go up. I haven't tested it, but I'm suggesting possibly that when you're observing something, your blood pressure, you're just noticing. Somebody does something, even if it's something that would irritate you, if you can take on the role of a witness instead of a judge, it's not so irritating. Somebody behaves badly, somebody's discourteous and rude to you, these things happen, and you're getting all upset and bad, and you've got all sorts of comments about society and about people and about these types of people, and your blood pressure is going up and up and up. Instead, just say, I noticed that. I just know that. I registered it. And leave the judgment to Hashem. You don't have to judge. So it's an important point, which we'll see in the Shari Tshuva. We can take it further, because a judge relies on Shmi'ah. Although we discussed yesterday that there are times when he has to see as well, but really he's listening to communication. Even the way we learned the Rav Gershon yesterday, the idea is still there's an intention to communicate, whether you communicate through an action or words, but you're communicating. A judge has to hear communication from the witnesses. The witnesses have to see. They don't have to hear anything. So the one is through Shmi'ah, the one is through listening, and the one is through seeing. When you're observing, you're using your eyes. When you're judging, you've got to use your ears. And there's a beautiful Shari Tshuva in Shari Bezot Yud Bet when he says, based on a posuk in Mishle, that Me'or Einayim Yisamach Lev, Yesh L'cho Chacham Lev Ladat, Ki Lo Yitachen, Shechibesh Shlomo Alav HaShalom Dvarim B'Teilim Ka'eleh Chinam. Don't think Shlomo HaMelech was just writing Proverbs. Mishle is not Proverbs. B'toch Divrei Amos V'yirat Hashem B'shekfar Hi'id Alav HaKatuv. The Torah says, Vayechekam Mikol Adam. Shlomo HaMelech was more wise than any human has ever been. So Mishle is a book of wisdom, not a book of Proverbs. So what's he telling us? The eye is a very precious limb, very precious organ. You can see light with it, and can make one very happy. It can uplift one to be able to see all the beautiful things there are to look at. But even greater than the eye is the ozen, is the ear. Because when you hear something that's beautiful, you hear something that's a simcha, you hear somebody's getting married, engaged, have a baby, or you hear a beautiful idea, it goes to the bone. It doesn't just give you superficial pleasure. It uplifts you from within. It uplifts you. That's the power of Shmiyah, that it uplifts you from the inside. If you hear a beautiful piece of Torah, it uplifts you from the etzim she'ein bar gasha. There's no feeling in the bone. Even though there's no feeling, it can inspire you. It can even inspire those who are as dead as a bone. An inspiring shir, an inspiring drosha can touch their hearts too. It doesn't happen with visual unless it's amazing. And you can see from the Gemara in Bava Kama that the ear is greater than the eye. If you, in laws of damages, if you blind a person, you've got to pay him, how the Gemara works out, the value of an eye. Sure, but if you make a person deaf, chas v'sholom, you have to pay him for his life, because you've ruined his life. Without an eye, you can still live. It's interesting. We might think that the opposite. But the Shara Tshuva tells us no, but based on Mishle, without an eye you can still be wise, you can understand nuance. People who are blind can even understand more nuance than people who can see. But without an ear, if you can't communicate, if you can't hear the messages, then what have you got? You've got to pay the person's whole life. But Rabbeinu Bechaya goes further in Shemot Ra'ora Iti. Hashem says, I have seen the poverty of my people, the suffering. V'etzakatam shamati, and I've listened to their tefillot. Because I've known their pain. Says Rabbeinu Bechaya, there are three things here. There's Ru'iyah, seeing. Greater than Ru'iyah is Shmiyah, being able to listen. And greater than Shmiyah is Yediyah, is just knowing something for a fact. Knowledge is even greater. I know something. Who cares where I get it from? It's clear. I know it for a fact. I know that there's a Ribono Shel Olam in the world. Have you seen him? No. Have you heard him? No. How do you know? I know. So Shreally Yediyah, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, is the highest of all. Asked Rabbi Chonon Wasserman, brought by the bottom by Shmuel Zovsky, asked Rabbi Chonon Wasserman, then let's do the same Kal Vachomer, just as we say the Lord Mishmiyah. If seeing is not great, surely seeing is not greater than surely hearing isn't greater than actually seeing something yourself, says Rabbi Chonon, and surely hearing something is not greater than knowing it. Surely then he doesn't quote the Rabbeinu Bechaya, but on the Rabbeinu Bechaya, basis of the Rabbeinu Bechaya, it's beautiful. The highest is to know something with clarity. If that's the case, if a דיין says, I know this person's guilty. Did you get evidence? I don't need evidence. Did you see anything? I don't need to see. I know he's guilty. Surely that Yediyah is the greatest of all. A great question. The answers Reb Shmuel. Yes, the trouble with Yediyah is everybody has their own opinion. Everybody knows their own thing. When it comes to seeing and hearing, the three Dayanim have to act in unison. They all saw the same thing, or they all heard the same thing. And they can discuss what it is that they heard and saw, and they can try and persuade one another. But when you're just talking about opinions, I believe that, I know that, that's a yochid. And judges don't work as individuals. Judges work as an eidah. They work as a community. That means it's got to be something that the whole community experiences, not something that some individual had a personal experience about. And so in this understanding of judging and observing, the idea of an aid sees, an aid watches, an aid observes, and we need to use our eyes. We talked yesterday about the need to use our eyes even when we're listening, to be able to look at a person's expression, to be able to look at a person's body language, to be able to hear the tone of voice, not only the words. There you're really getting into a judgment mode. And to realize that for judgment you need divine intuition, you need the Ribono Shel Olam to help you. Because to make a judgment, you're putting together so many data points, and even beyond the data points, so that we should understand and we should know. Most of the time when things happen around us and people do things around us, make a choice. Am I an aid or am I a דיין? If I'm an aid, I've noticed, I'm not walking around with my eyes closed. I noticed how this person behaves. I file it away in my mind. I'm aware of it. It's a fact. It's a data point. But I'm not making a judgment. I don't have enough divine knowledge to be able to make a judgment about the person. When one is making a judgment, otherwise, but there are times when we've got to use shmiya, when we've got to listen. We've got to listen with everything that we have, and we've got to listen with nuance. We've got to listen for tone, and we've got to listen for intention, and we've got to listen for body language. Our listening has to be so alert and so awake that we don't miss some of the fine clues and messages that enable us to get down to the wisdom needed to make a judgment. Because judgment is a function of knowledge, it's a function of wisdom, and it's a function of deep intuition, something that is a gift that we need to treasure.